MDMA as a college student was the first time in my life that I felt through direct experience what compassion is. It brought tears and joy to my being all in the same moment. It was that ecstatic moment, knowing sheer bliss and deep suffering and pain. I could really understand it. It felt like it was a one-way door that opened and it never closed.
To compassion.
To compassion. To really be able to sit with someone and feel what they're feeling. Take it in and try and expand my understanding and just sit with it and have the courage and audacity to really just sit there and be with someone and feel into what they're feeling. There's no question in my mind this medicine is deep medicine.
Brad Jacobs, Dr. Brad Jacobs, my favorite concierge physician and leader in transformation. Welcome back to the podcast.
Great to be back here, Sara. Thank you for having me again.
So today we're talking about healing states of consciousness, and we're going to continue the conversation about masculinity and how it's evolving, how you're leading the way with the evolution of masculinity. And I wonder if you could maybe start with, tell us about healing states of consciousness. What are they? How are they useful? How should we be thinking about them?
People talk about augmented states of consciousness, altered states of consciousness, expanded states of consciousness. I like to think about certain states of consciousness as healing states. I don't think it's great to call them altered, because altered implies sort of a more pejorative term. Expanded is interesting, augmented, but healing really relates to our own personal healing, and you and I both are really interested in that space. And so I think there's so much to learn by holding this framework of our consciousness in the terms of healing states of consciousness. And that can be having a beautiful conversation like we're having right now, could be a healing state of consciousness. Spending a month immersed on the John Muir Trail is definitely a healing state. Me going surfing and taking off on some 20-foot big wave is definitely entering me into a different state of consciousness that's healing. And psychedelics are another pathway into that. So I think of that framework around how do we drop ourselves into like small bits, like day to day, a healing state of consciousness every single day, a little small dose. Could be 5 minutes. Could be a full LSD trip for 12 hours or a month-long process in nature.
Yeah, as you're talking, I'm realizing that I learned this term from you. And it's a way of maybe shifting out of the way that some folks look at breath work or meditation or even psychedelic medicine. It's a way of shifting out of kind of the recreational use of some of these things versus how do we really hold them in a more sacred way that could support our transformation and unfolding.
Yeah, I think setting intention is so important, and people will do Molly and go to a rave party or eat mushrooms or LSD spray. Everyone's into the microdosing. I think to hold some sacredness and reverence to the medicine and to how you go about your day, and to separate the craziness of our days from a little bit of sacred time that you're like, this is about my spirit. This is about my emotion. This is about my mind. This is not about escapism. And, altered states, escapism, right? And even the other terms we use. So, yeah, I like the term healing states of consciousness because I feel like it helps your own healing just to even frame it that way.
So you had a curious start to, if we begin maybe with MDMA, you had an experience in college that really stands out to me. Can you share what happened?
Yeah. For the first time in my life, I blew my mind open to actually understanding deeply firsthand, having a direct experience of compassion.
Can you say it again? Because that's a really good soundbite.
Yeah. MDMA as a college student was the first time in my life that I felt through direct experience what compassion is. It brought tears and joy to my being all in the same moment. It was that ecstatic moment of like knowing sheer bliss and deep suffering and pain. Like I could really understand it. At the time, we didn't know about mirror neurons, but it was really that sort of feeling of really being able to resonate with what someone else was feeling. Blew my mind.
So, what are mirror neurons? Can you explain what they are?
I can give you a limited explanation of my my understanding of them is people on the spectrum, for example, don't have them very well defined, refined, and there is the sort of a paucity of them. And the mirror neuron is I see you, I'm taking you in through sensory perception, and I accommodate, I adjust by perceiving where you're at, what you're at emotionally, what you're saying at a sort of a psycho-emotional place. So that emotional intelligence is even, my understanding, even it relates to, learning something. That would be a task that you model it, you watch someone do it, and then you go ahead and do that same procedure. Like we did in residency, the old do one, then teach one. Watch one, do one, teach one method. People whose mirror neurons aren't highly operational struggle.
So you're saying that your mirror neurons got turned on, they got activated in a powerful way.
That's what it felt like. I don't know. I mean, I didn't have someone map my brain, but for sure. I mean,
it's a really interesting concept. That there was something maybe more dormant until you had this experience with MDMA.
Yeah, and here's the cool part for me. It was really interesting. So there's a cohort of us, about 20 of us. We were juniors and seniors in college. This was in 1986. MDMA was legal then. And
did everybody get that?
It was legal. Right. It got pulled off the market because it was too good. Yeah.
And this was the just say no era
of
drug policy.
Yeah. So I'm a one and done guy when it comes to MDMA. So we all did it. We all dressed up, like we had costume. Some of us were in clown outfits. We had like bubbles and we had juggling things, like total college, 1986. And we had makeup. People put stuff on themselves and beautiful balloons, and off we went. We spent the day like having so much fun. And we even did these trust games where we'd get up on the fence. It's like stand on this fence and we'd fall backwards and we'd all catch each other. And it was just this amazing bonding moment. I can remember sitting down with someone and just engaging in conversation and really feeling what they were talking about. It was almost like a cross-sensory perception, where I could almost, feel their voice. I can hear colors. I mean, it wasn't literally that way, but it was like that deep of experience. And we all had such a beautiful experience. And for all of us, it was the first time. And so, of course, the following weekend, everyone wanted to do it again. And so we did it again. And I remember feeling so deflated because it was nothing like the first time. What happened was the door opened. And from that moment on, the previous week, I felt the world differently, like in perpetuity, by the way. Like it has not changed.
So what changed? So you said that it felt like you said you felt like your mirror neurons were turned on.
Yeah. It felt like it was a one-way door that opened and it never closed.
To compassion.
To compassion. To really be able to sit with someone and feel what they're feeling, and or at least to take it in and try and expand my understanding and just sit with it and have the courage and audacity to really just sit there and be with someone and feel into what they're feeling and try to understand it. It was just, it's a felt sense. It's really hard to put words to. And when that happened, and then I did MDMA, like I said, the second time, I didn't get some amazing experience again because it already changed me. And now most of my other friends did it and they loved it. And then a lot of them kept doing it over and over. And that is the risk. And that's partly why I came off the market, right? Because people love the feeling and then they keep hitting it. I never did it again for years after that because it didn't do much, but it was profound. And And I know many other people that have had the same experience. And so there's no question in my mind this medicine is deep medicine. It's not your pharmaceutical drug that you take on the daily or take with regularity. So back to healing states of consciousness, to doing it with some intention and then having these insights that you have, which then leads to either just it vaporizing, which many of us, we go back to our set point, or how we walk through the world back to our set point, like people that lose 50 pounds and they gain it back again. We have a hard time changing. And the goal here is get some insights, and then how do you bake that into your new and create a new way of living?
So I want to talk about behavior change, because I think that healing states of consciousness are really important for behavior change. I want to talk about your experience with working with clients. You do ketamine assisted treatment. And I want to maybe just finish with MDMA by reflecting back something I heard from you. I forget when you first shared this with me, but I've known you for 30 years, so it was a while ago. You talked about how you felt like your heart opened on MDMA.
Yeah.
That first experience. And it just remained open.
That's right. Yeah. My heart did open. I think I was, I've always been somewhat of a heart-forward human, but it really opened then. And, life experiences can harden our hearts for sure. But it really, really cracked it open in a beautiful way. Yeah.
It feels like it's a big part of what makes you who you are. As a physician, as a man.
Yeah.
As a friend.
Yeah, it's a little bit of a chicken and egg, I think. It's hard to know, right? Did I have the right setup that then allowed that to happen? So, I was raised doing martial arts. I was raised in a family that's sort of, my mom in particular is pretty process oriented. And I had my own share of, personal trauma and family drama and chaos. This just broke that door open. My heart it broke open. And so I could feel. It's, there's breaking your heart open where you're weeping and you're crying, and there's that process. This for me was some of that, but it really was a sensory organ to feel the world. And so then learning how to manage that. But to crack that open, your heart being a sensory organ to feel the world is deep. It was unexpected and profound. Yeah.
I want to connect it also to the most recent data that we have about the use of MDMA assisted therapy for different conditions in which a healing state of consciousness can be helpful. So MAPS has been involved in 2 phase 3 trials using MDMA assisted therapy to treat post-traumatic stress disorder. And our hope was to get it FDA approved for the treatment of PTSD. Can you share with us the data that you're familiar with on PTSD and the treatment with MDMA assisted therapy?
Yeah, so the one thing that's really important to know is that the psychedelic medicine model breaks the pharmaceutical drug industry financial business model and how doctors are used to prescribing medications. And for that very reason, I think the FDA has a hard time with it.
Good point.
The other reason, so financial, a lot of guys on the FDA advisory board or advisory committees have their own pockets lined with money coming from the pharmaceutical drug industry. Number 2, the MDMA clinical trials partnered with psychotherapy, and the FDA is not used to that. With that said, the FDA advisory committee advised them to do it that way. So the design was informed by the FDA's recommendations, and then they turned around and said that was an issue. So that's a whole nother part of the conversation. But the data shows that you do the clinical trials, they gave them 3 doses a month apart with psychotherapy in between weekly, total of essentially 9 sessions with some prep before and some integration at the end. And that was it. And then, so you got 3 months, and then at 12 months, they had sustained benefit.
Which is so critical because we're comparing that to a model of using drugs in psychiatry where you take a pill every day.
Every day. Every day.
This is a very disruptive model.
Yep. Take it every day. That pharmaceutical drug companies love that. You are now beholden to them. And of course, as the insurance industry is requiring us to pay more and more of those medications, you go bankrupt through that process too. So the traditional treatment, conventional medical treatment, is SSRIs or other antidepressants for people with PTSD, plus years of psychotherapy. And as you know, the efficacy of that is roughly a third of the people get better, meaning that a lot of people actually kill themselves because suicide rates are quite high. And in these clinical trials, over 90%, particularly the severe PTSD group, I believe it was over 90% had suicidal ideation or tried to commit suicide. Compared to this group that received the MDMA, they over 72%, I believe it was, were in remission from PTSD 12 months out.
So more than twice as effective.
More than twice as effective, yeah, 2.5. So it's profound, and there's been nothing like it. And in part, the FDA said that too. How can we believe this data? It's so good, it can't be true. Meanwhile, it was a multi-center, randomized, blinded clinical trial. We can talk about the details of, the scientific rigor of the studies and where there's some problems with it. And it's true, it's hard to double blind a person from receiving active medication where you have this big experience versus placebo. But they did get psychotherapy for the same number of hours. And so it doesn't really matter. Can people really have that big of a placebo effect that's 9 months later? No. There's no way. Sure, maybe for the moment you have this huge benefit by having all this attention and thinking you're getting MDMA. But the truth is, all that attention was being given to the control arm as well. So anyway, I'm really excited about the data, and it'll just take a while for the government to come around and actually be able to sort of cut through all this.
Another thing I know you for is peak experiences. So you're someone who loves to ski in the backcountry. You like double diamonds. You do things I can't even describe on skis. You love to surf. You love to go to Ocean Beach in the wintertime when the surf is big. You love thrill. You love mountain biking. You love adventure. How did peak experiences fit into this?
Yeah. So let's define the peak experience. And I think peak experiences can be healing experiences and put you into healing states of consciousness. And, there's a couple different ways to look at these adrenaline drunky people that maybe I might fit into the box of, which is there's nothing better. I mean, it feels amazing. Either you're in the present moment, there's this adrenaline, you feel more alive in that moment than you do at pretty much in any other moment. In part, I like emergency medicine. I loved my trauma surgery rotation when I was a med student because it's game on and it's life and death. And there's that rawness that most people, at least some people I could say of your listeners hopefully can relate to, that really just drops you in and it clears your mind. So there's no past. There's no future. There's only the present moment. And there's huge relief to be just in the present moment. And the question is, are you chasing the thrill over and over? And, admittedly, I do chase that thrill over and over. And how do you leverage it for your own sort of benefit and drop in to learn about yourself rather than escape from the craziness of our lives? And I've run that edge a lot. Am I going off to the next trip to escape my current reality? Or am I going off to the next trip to escape, but also to get some learnings as well? So I think that's a new edge for me to reflect on. It took me decades to be able to say what I'm saying to you right now, because I would tell you it's healthy for me, it's good for me. This is why I'm doing it. And that's all true. But also, as life gets more challenging, you start to realize, maybe a little bit of this is escapism. But better that than going to the bar and drinking alcohol every day,
That's true.
you know.
So, with healing states of consciousness, can you share more about what kind of experiences you have in your life right now?
Yeah.
Like what is alive for you?
So I want to come back. You talked about me as a primary care doc. You know, I run this practice called Blue Wave Medicine. I'm a concierge medicine doc and here in the Bay Area. And I've done my work for 30 years, right after residency. And it's hard. People want to make changes. And our practice is very curated. We put a lot of energy into people. We create a huge ecosystem around them, up to 18 practitioners that sort of help support people, and personal trainers, nutritionists. You go through the whole line, acupuncturists, et cetera. And yet
the best referrals
as well, and all the best technology and precision medicine. But with all that said, so people want to make changes in their life, and they generally do. And, as I do in my own life, and yet it's so hard to make those changes. We find ourselves falling back to our regular routines. And we can talk about why that is, and we can talk about the rebus model, relaxed beliefs under the influence of psychedelics. But the question, so putting that aside for a moment, that was increasingly frustrating for me, because here I am really providing, I think, one of the best primary care experiences you can really provide somebody. I mean, so much support, so individualized. And yet, a third of the half of the people make some big changes. What happens to the other folks? In a regular primary care model with insurance-based, 2% make it. And it's not because their doctors are helping them make those changes. So what's going on? And it's hard to get out of your own way. And so that dropped me into what can we do? And that brought me into the realm of psychedelics, because I realized with psychedelics, through my own personal experience, it completely shifted my status quo, my set point.
How?
Well, I'll give you the experience, which we've talked about before, which is I did in 2016. I did a session of ayahuasca, and I did it. I was very fortunate. I did it with two very gifted and experienced practitioners.
Can you also just, so we're all on the same page, explain what ayahuasca is?
Yeah. So ayahuasca is two different types of plants, a vine and a plant, that are combined and often mixed with other teacher plants that originally is from South America and from out of the Amazon. It's been around for millennia. And that brew that is made then leads to an experience that's a psychedelic experience. It uses both DMT, which normally isn't very bioactive for a very long period of time. Like if you think of the buffalo, the toad, 5-MeO DMT, for example, lasts 15 minutes. But in this setting, when it's combined with another plant, then you get, which has hormelines in it, that combination allows the DMT to be active for a longer period of time. So together, you get a 4 to 6 hour experience. The hormelines provide insight and reflection and insight. And the DMT is the very psychoactive and very visually active component. So that combination results in, you get some insights in the beginning from the hormelines, and then you get a very psychoactive experience. And then on the backside, some more insights as well that come in. So it's a beautifully developed psychedelic medicine that is beyond my comprehension and the wisdom keepers that made that. So I had this experience where I had a lot of resentment towards a colleague who I felt departed on unethical terms, and I felt betrayed. I felt hurt. I had a lot of anger and resentment, and I held it for a while. And then I had this experience and this psychedelic journey, and in that I was able to see her point of view that I wasn't able to understand before. And though I wasn't able to forgive her at that point, although now I have, at that point I was able to see it, and that completely melted my resentment, my anger. It just completely shifted me deeply. And after that, I realized everything so much lifted for me. I felt much lighter, and I had a very different way of walking through the world, including recognizing that sometimes I just don't get it. I don't get the other person's point of view, and I may feel all these feelings, but there's another point of view, and I just may not have it yet. So from that experience, I realized that psychedelics have the opportunity to shift people in a big way. And within my model that I've developed around peak experience and transformation, I think it's just not, the problem is, for example, a lot of people go and do psychedelics, but they sort of go back to their set point. Again, they go back to their they have these great insights, and then they go back to their regular life. So I think you need a lot more of a protocol. So my protocol is intention setting, prep, Then you do the medicine, you have this peak experience, you enter this healing state of consciousness. And then you get these insights that sort of fall out. But then the real work begins. The real work is actually then bringing those insights into the mundane life of your daily life, which is hard. And that's the habituation part. That's the accountability part. That's where you really need to substantiate it. And then you can make real change. So I've adopted that model into my primary care practice, where I'm really trying to entice people, encourage them to enter healing states of consciousness, whether it's psychedelic medicine, whether it's, immersion retreats, whether it's breath work. There's so many opportunities there. But I think that model of being able to sort of set up a peak experience that allows people to transform and become the aspired version of themselves that they want to become is totally exciting for me.
This is exciting because you and I both have been in medicine for 30 years. We both know that behavior change is such a hard nut to crack. And it feels like what you're speaking to is something that a lot of people can access as a way of having the kind of insights that allow them to make behavior changes. Does the Rebus model fit in here? Like, tell me about the Rebus model and where that fits in.
Yeah, so Robin Carhart-Harris, who's now here at UCSF, which is great. What a win for San Francisco. He's doing great work. In 2019, wrote a paper exploring this model that he hypothesized, which I think has a lot of veracity to it, and it really speaks to the fact that we walk through the world in fixed states of belief. We sort of understandably need our reticular activating system needs to filter out. There's so much coming at us stimuli-wise. We need to filter out and focus on like what's happening right now, in the here and now. And in so doing, we tend to filter things down and accept things in relationship to our previous life experience. Because if we experience everything fresh for the first time as if it's never happened before, it's so much to take in.
It's overwhelming.
So this concept is that we have fixed beliefs because we base it on previous experience. Now, that goes back to the conversation of like, we spend most of our lives in the past and in the future. We're either worrying or we're ruminating. We're worrying about the future or we're ruminating about the past. When you think about, there's some truth to that. So what can psychedelics do? And other ways of back to healing states of consciousness is it can relax those fixed beliefs. So we're able to consider alternative views. We're able to look at previous life experience and see it from different sides of it and realize the narrative that we hold isn't truth. It's just a narrative. And it allows us to repattern. That's my point of view. What's your take on the Rebus model?
Yeah, it feels like it relates to cognitive rigidity. That there's these structures that we have that get us maybe to function more efficiently, but the cost of it is that we get stuck. And so my experience with psychedelic medicine and other healing states of consciousness is that it allows you to have more maybe objectivity or a witnessing consciousness with some of those beliefs that are creating the cognitive rigidity.
Yeah. Some witnessing consciousness.
Yes.
Yeah. So the ability to observe yourself in real time.
That's right.
Yeah. Being able to get outside yourself and witness it so that you can then see what's really happening.
Yes.
And get out of our fixed patterns.
So, what helps you in this regard? You're not doing psychedelics every day. I know you're working hard in your concierge medical practice over at Blue Wave Medicine.
Yeah. I like to microdose on yoga and Tai Chi.
That's good.
That's what I do. So I like to microdose ideally twice a day on yoga, usually on the ends of the day. So I wake up, roll out of bed, and have the yoga mat already laid out and get on the mat. And I can tell you today, by way of example, like I was rushing around getting ready for the day, and I didn't realize how much tension I was holding. I had no idea. And I didn't realize how compressed I felt energetically and how my mind was working in a compressed way because I was trying to be super efficient until I got on the mat and I realized my body was compressed. And so all of a sudden I started breathing and literally my spine cracked, like it just rippled through my spine like a zipper. I'm like, oh my God. And then my diaphragm dropped and my chest expanded. It was amazing. And so that was literally 7 minutes of yoga. I mean, admittedly, it helps when you prime the pump. So the night before, I had done 5 or 10 minutes of yoga too, right? So it's like, it doesn't take much to like open up the energetics in the system when you're doing it on the daily, but you only need to do it 5 to 30 minutes. So that's how I drop in. It's way better than, I love whiskey and tequila. It's way better than whiskey and tequila.
Nice.
Yeah.
So I'm curious, you've talked about masculinity. I'm curious how this might fit with the way you approach and conceive of masculinity.
Yeah.
And there's a quote in particular that I just want to bring into our conversation because I think it's kind of a juicy topic. And this is something that showed up as a meme on Instagram. So here's the quote, or maybe you read it.
Sure. A whole generation worked to empower women, but forgot to teach men how we live with empowered women. It's a great quote.
Do you agree?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. You asked me a question about witnessing and just to reflect back on that. And I think that relates to this quote, which is when I do my microdosing of yoga, my yoga microdose, there's a lot, I get to witness myself, how compressed I felt, notice the thoughts that are running through my head. It's a moment to be able to like look back. It's like putting a mirror up and reflecting back. And it's really a beautiful thing. And that's the same process that needs to happen as a culture for men, that we need to be able to witness ourselves and see how we behave and then make adjustments. And as a culture, we're not doing that. And I think instead we're reacting, right? Instead of having curiosity, creativity, and innovation, we're reacting. So I think what this quote speaks to is, rightfully so, we've allowed women, we've helped women, we as a culture, as a whole, many men haven't, but as a culture, and have women become more empowered, right? Allow them to empower themselves. We supported that. And men then don't know how to behave. All of a sudden, we have an empowered woman. I'm used to control and domination. That's sort of, as we referred to in another conversation we've had here about the M1 man, the toxic masculine man, which is ripe in politics right now.
And we'll link back to our conversation about M1 men, M2 men, M3 men, but maybe you could just recap for us.
Yeah. So, in brief, the M1 man is the toxic masculine man, the one that likes to control and dominate. They also have good attributes as well, which is dominate with consent, protect, have courage, and be powerful and strong. Like, those are great attributes. So you don't throw everything out. The M2 man is
They don't always dominate with consent.
Right. Well, that's correct. I'm saying dominating with consent is the positive aspect.
The cleaner version.
The cleaner version. But the toxic aspect is control and domination, power over. M2 is taking that then to the other extreme, which is really essentially capitulating all that power and saying yes to whatever your woman wants, or the counterpart of women in culture. And in so doing, the men lose their own way. They lose their own North Star. Those men tend to also, however, or in addition, be emotionally intelligent. They're able to be present. They're able to show compassion. They're able to be vulnerable. And there's a lot to be said about that too. So the M3 man is the aspired version that we want more and more of and to bring in this world. And that takes the positive attributes of M1 and M2. So someone who's strong, protecting, and is able to dominate with consent, and also be emotionally available, present, communicate well. And that combination is ripe with opportunity. And that allows a man to be in relationship with an empowered woman in a way that doesn't feel threatening to them, because they've found their own way, they've explored their own shadow side, and they're able to be resonant and present in the presence of power.
It feels like there's a way that you're talking about this that is asking men to step up and asking men to do the inner work to show up in this way.
Amen.
Because I think the misconception, like with this quote, you can see in the comments, like this was shared, I don't know, 6,000 times. There's 345 comments. A lot of the women who responded were saying it's not women's job to teach men how to live with empowered women. So I hear you say something different, which is, this is your work, men.
That's right. Yeah. So a lot of people feel it's a zero-sum game. So if you're more empowered, then I'm less empowered. That's the problem. Because they're still stuck in the dominant theory, the just dominant paradigm. One of us has to be dominant. We can't both have power. And it's a power over mentality rather than power with. We can't share the power. So if you have more power, that means I have less. It's like a tug of war. That's the problem. So men, and it's men's issue. And sure, there's a lot of wounding that women have had, rightfully so. And there's some toxicity around that too. But that's not my place. My focus is on men, and it's men's time to step up and own their parts and say to themselves, like, yeah, we can have power we can share this power. And there's huge polarity that creates even more great sexuality and great sort of chemistry with a woman when you can share power together and consent over domination, but it's consensual. And you can be a strong, courageous man and be emotionally intelligent and present and be partnered with a woman who can also have her power there too. And it's great. It creates great chemistry. We just need to... My job now, what I'm excited about, is helping men see that light and find this new path.
Okay, that's the world I want to live in. So how do you help men do this? What are the steps? Like, what is it with Hakomi that you help men explore their inner world and allow them to understand the ways that maybe their unconscious is driving the M1 or the M2 phenotype? How do you work with this?
Yeah, so Hakomi, Hakomi, and I think you did an episode with Rob Fisher on Hakomi, one of the master teachers, is a body-based, mindfulness-oriented psychotherapy. So it cuts through the talk therapy. It is not talk therapy, which is great because it gets us out of our head. And yeah, it allows you to witness, back to witnessing, like you said. It allows us to witness ourself and all our patterns that we do. And that is the way out of the box, is to be able to observe yourself and hopefully one day laugh at it, right? And sort of be like, here I go again for the 15,000th time. I'm acting this way. I'm feeling scared. I'm getting angry. I want to get out of the car and choke somebody, which is sort of unfortunately my past when I was more of an M1 guy back in my 30s. And then I found myself capitulating and feeling shame and guilt around that, and all of a sudden being the M2 guy. So I've lived it. And I think entering healing states of consciousness, exploring self-inquiry, being with other men together. These are all methods that I'm using and doing with folks through online programming and through retreats and other immersion experiences where people can enter this and do this in community with other men that are going through the same process. And M1 men can learn from M2 men, and M2 men can learn from M1 men. And together we all can become M3 men. And I think it's a beautiful trajectory. And I think there's no better time than right now.
We need it.
Yeah.
So we've talked about psychedelic medicine right now. MDMA, LSD, psilocybin are all Schedule 1. Ketamine is not. So you offer ketamine in your practice. You work with clients using ketamine. Tell us about that. How do you work with it?
Yeah. So Schedule 1 means that there's has addiction potential and has no medical but known benefit.
Which is untrue when it comes to these.
Marijuana
patients.
was categorized in that as well, by the way, which prevented any research to be done on any of these, by the way, because of how it's scheduled. So the DEA wouldn't allow research for 50 years. So I use ketamine. Ketamine is known as a horse tranquilizer, pejoratively. It is used for animals as well as humans. It's used in the operating room and the emergency room daily, tens of thousands of times a day. And
it's the anesthesia of choice for children.
Yeah. My daughter was given ketamine when she was burned, when she was like 2.5 years old, because it removes you. It's a dissociative, so you step away from your body. And so we can work on your burn and you won't feel the pain. It's also a potent antidepressant and is approved for treatment-resistant depression. The FDA has approved it. So, of course, they approved the formulation which is the most addictive, which is the nasal bullet. So, it's the bullet that you snort, just like people do with cocaine. So that's a whole nother conversation. But the versions that we use are lozenges that you put in your mouth or intramuscular injection. I don't think intravenous is needed. It's very clinical. You put an IV in somebody and you infuse it. You don't need to do it that way. Ketamine-assisted psychotherapy is beautiful in that you can really titrate the dosing. At the low dose, it's a heart-opening medicine molecule. And at a higher dose, it's dissociative and it's psychedelic. And so you can sort of titrate between those two. People call K-holes, it's sort of the higher dose where you basically get, on the outside, you look catatonic, like you're non-responsive, you're not really interacting. You're in a, quote, K-hole, not super enjoyable. But people, find themselves doing this at rave parties and other things like that. So it is more addictive than, if you look at Daniel Nutt's article that he describes a range of medicines for pharmaceutical and recreational and their level of social and individual harm. So ketamine sort of, less than benzodiazepines, way less than alcohol, way less than heroin, but it's, a third of the way up the scale. And LSD, magic mushrooms, and MDMA are on the far right, the least amount of harm. So ketamine.
We'll link to, I think it's David Nutt's work.
Yeah, that's right.
I think the main takeaway there is that alcohol is so much more harmful and addictive than any of these more sacred medicines that we're talking about today.
Yeah, that's right. It's ranked number 1. So ketamine's about 75 minutes, typically, how long it lasts. So, I usually work with people 3 to 4 hours they put aside. I ask them to clear out the rest of their day. Ideally, then do it on a Friday, let's say, clear out your weekend. I ask people to set intentions. I fill out a questionnaire, help them set intentions and really prepare for it. Do a little bit of a dieta, a little bit of clean their diet up, stop using any recreational drugs. That means alcohol, ideally caffeine, and then really set their intention and then have this experience and then do a lot of either, this may sound a little hokey, but I ask people to either do painting or drawing as images and things come up and reflections and insights, journaling, and then spend the next few days sort of integrating all that. And then I work with them for that following month, where we'll meet a couple of days after that, and then meet the following week, and then depending on the cadence of what they need. And that integration period is super, super important, like we were talking about earlier. And the neuroplasticity lasts days, if not 30 days, right? So there's some great work mapping that out as well that shows all the new neural connections that are made over the subsequent 30 days. It's remarkable. Like,
It is remarkable.
What other medicine does that? What other experiences do that?
Well, pretty much no medicine that I know of. And there was I think the chief of psychiatry at Yale who talked about how it's not ketamine itself. It's this ongoing response that the body has to what ketamine opens you to.
That's right.
So I think it's a powerful way to think about these. Again, really adjacent to the medical model, adjacent to this pharmaceutical model.
That's right. Yeah, just to underline that again, that's really powerful. Yeah. Yeah, you take a pill and it's having a pharmacologic effect.
Usually by blocking an enzyme or some pathway in the body.
Yeah. Even like blood pressure medicine, you take that pill, lowers your blood pressure, and when the medicine goes away, your blood pressure goes up again. This is totally different model. This is, you take a pill or you take a medicine, ketamine in this example, and then you have this potent experience that leads to insight, and that insight and other biochemical and neurologic processes then just unravel over the next month, leading to greater and greater change, new neural network patterning. It's amazing. Yeah.
So you do really interesting work in primary care, all the way through to healing states of consciousness and transformation with your patients. This is a whole new way of doing primary care. Like I don't know of anyone else who does this type of care with their patients.
Yeah. So I think there's two reasons for it. So one, frustrated, right? I want people to change, like I'm trying to change, and I change, and not white knuckle stopping drinking their alcohol. All of a sudden they have the psychedelic experience and they just don't have the appetite for alcohol anymore. Beautiful thing to witness. Beautiful. And the other part is just at a macro level. So we spend trillions of dollars on healthcare. The number one reason for personal bankruptcy is medical related. It's horrible. We should be ashamed of ourselves as a government and society around that. And 70% of our money is going towards issues related to chronic disease, of which 70+% can be changed by lifestyle. So if you change people's behaviors, back to what you're talking about, you can solve this medical crisis we're in a heartbeat. So this is the through line. And what's beautiful is it doesn't require the system. You can disintermediate the bureaucratic medical complex, and you can go straight in and do it in partnership ideally with practitioners and guides that are helping you, but you can drop in your own healing state and heal yourself through this process for many, many health issues. It's beautiful. So that's why I got excited about it as a primary care doc.
It's unusual. It's an unusual way to hold it as a tool that you offer to your patients to help them with behavior change, to help them with suffering less, and just understanding their inner world. So as we start to wrap up our time together, any final thoughts or things that you want to share?
The one thing that comes to mind is about most doctors talk to their patients about diseases, and most patients, A, don't have a disease, or B, don't really want to focus on that disease. And it's so much more relevant to talk about what's going on than 99% of their life, which is how are they sleeping? What are their relationships like? How stressed are they? And I just want to encourage everyone listening to try and have those conversations with their doctors, because those are the conversations that matter on our day-to-day living. And those are the conversations that need to happen in order to prevent future disease. And I also want to say what an honor it is to spend time with you, all the work you've done for men and women in this world. And it's such a beautiful thing to have you doing this podcast. And thank you for having me.
My pleasure.
Yeah.
Thank you, Dr. Brad Jacobs.
Great to be with you, Dr. Sara Zoll.